Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Constructive Uncoupling, the podcast devoted to amicable divorces. I'm Judy Weigel, your host and your amicable divorce expert. Why? Because that's all I try to do, amicable divorces. I'm a divorce mediator and a legal document assistant, which means I file for amicable divorces. Now, what makes things amicable? Not skipping and jumping and holding hands and walking into the office. Amicable in a divorce environment means you are able to speak to one another throughout the divorce process, enough so to make decisions about your settlement, and no one believes the other is hiding significant assets. Other than that, you can disagree. It's fine. We disagree on a good day with each other, don't we? But for divorce, you have to be able to speak to one another, or you have to hire attorneys. So let's go back to amicable divorce and how does an amicable divorce get to a settlement agreement? Well, you either get to one on your own because you truly are able to speak to one another, or you engage in the mediation process. Mediation is so perfect for divorces because you can control the outcome, you can control the expense, and you can control the transition from the divorce to post-divorce by the way you handle yourself in mediation. But in order for mediations to be successful, I have 10 tips for mistakes to avoid. So these are my top 10 mediation mistakes I would like to share with you. Ready? Number 1, no legal information. Now, I don't mean don't get legal information. I mean people come into the mediation without legal information. It is so unbelievably important that you seek legal advice and legal information. You can still make your own decisions, but you want to make your decisions with what we call informed consent. So you want to know what the legal lay of the land is, and then when you compromise, because this is all about compromise now, in mediation we compromise, we negotiate and we compromise to a certain extent. You're able to compromise knowing what you're giving up or knowing what you're adjusting to get to a better goal. Going to attorneys and getting legal advice is not bad. People think they're being disloyal. People think they're doing something inappropriate if they seek attorney advice. Everybody should do that. It's a smart thing to do. But you want attorney advice from very knowledgeable attorneys and people who are not going to set up your expectations unrealistically. So that starts it. Number 2 piggybacks onto it. Getting the wrong information from an inappropriate attorney who doesn't specialize in family law. I cannot tell you how many people come in here and they have not seen a family law attorney. They've seen an attorney that they happen to know, that they've used for civil matters. But attorneys are like doctors. You know, now doctors specialize in everything. We have very few general practitioners, don't we? Same thing with attorneys. You really just should talk to a family law attorney, and a family law attorney in the state of California, if you're in California, or a family law attorney in whatever state you're getting divorced in. Because divorce laws are different in every state. They're similar and they're different. And I say maybe talk to 2 or 3 attorneys. I think it's wise because how would you know if an attorney is giving you appropriate information? How would you really know? Well, you don't unless you talk to 2 or 3 attorneys. Then when you see similar things coming out of more than one attorney's meeting, then you'll know, okay, this is what it is. And then also you can Google. You know, just Google the questions that you ask the attorneys. Everything's online anymore. But you want to put the state in which you're getting divorced in. That's very, very important when you ask your Google question. Number 3, hiring the wrong mediator. So all mediators deal with different styles of mediation. There are 3 different styles of mediation. There's directive mediation, there's transformative, and there's narrative. And it's different approaches that different mediators take. Now, if you want to go with an attorney mediator, they're more than likely going to use a very directive approach. They're going to speculate what the judge may say if you have to go to court. They're going to recite law to you. Reciting law is great and kind of letting you know what possibly might work out if you had to seek a judge's intervention to make decisions for you. That's not bad either. But please know that all judges don't decide the same way. And there are ranges of decisions that judges are allowed to make in any topic area within a divorce. Maybe a directive approach isn't right. Maybe you don't want an attorney mediator. Maybe you want a non-attorney mediator that will approach things more creatively, that will listen harder to what both you and your spouse are saying, and really listen for a compromise that will work for both of you. A lot of times attorneys aren't able to do that, especially if they've spent a lot of years as litigators. They're very focused on outcome, and a lot of times they want to be more directive on outcome. Well, if you don't want your mediator to be more directive, then maybe somebody who practices transformative or narrative mediation is better. Look this up online. Narrative, transformative, and directive. 3 different styles, and definitely ask the mediators that you're talking to, ask them what styles they work in. And then, of course, there's the price. Listen, in a divorce mediation, if you don't have an enormous number of assets, $750 an hour, even $500 an hour is a lot to pay. There are really good mediators, non-attorney mediators, who work in the $200+ range. Most of my contemporaries do. I'm at $225 an hour, and that is the normal price range for mediators who are not attorneys. Number 4, coming to a mediation not organized. It is so vitally important that you organize yourself. It's vitally important that you have all the support documentation that you need for any asset or debt that you're going to be discussing in terms of division. It's important that you have your disclosure forms with you if you're halfway through the filing process. Any of you who are, you know that in every divorce you have to do disclosure forms. One will be about assets and debts, and one will be about what you make and what you spend. These are so integral to the mediation process, to the decision-making process, because you have to know the whole universe of assets and debts that you have to mediate. You can't come in not knowing things, or you're not going to get as much accomplished. And then, let's just say you have all of your ducks lined up. You have all of your support documents there. Are they in a binder with tabs so that you can easily put your hands on them? People come in with folders, and that's great. They've at least collected the information. But you're nervous when you're in a mediation. And accessing information quickly, it's hard unless it's tabbed, unless you can see where it is. And believe me, I've been in a mediation before, business mediation. I was one of the parties, and I am super organized. And I know how stressful it is to sit in a mediation and have to get your hands on something to support what you're going to say and not be able to find it, and you knew it's there. You know it's there because you put it there before you left, and all of a sudden you can't find it. It's so frustrating, and I really get it. So when you organize, challenge yourself to find different documents and see if you can get them immediately. But I'm telling you, putting things in a binder with tabs, it'll make your life so much easier inside of a mediation. Number 5, you might have unrealistic expectations of media and unrealistic expectations of the law. So in a mediation, it is your opportunity to craft a settlement agreement that works for both you and your spouse. A mediator should not tell you what to do. A mediator can brainstorm with you. A mediator can share examples of other situations with other couples and give you ideas on how they did a similar deal and see if that works for you. A really good mediator will be able to listen to both of you and start visualizing a compromise that neither of you would have thought of. Because the reason why you're in mediation a lot of times is that you hit a brick wall. When you're trying to sit down and do it yourself, you are invested in what you want to accomplish. You only know of 1 or 2 ways to get there, and there are really more than 2 ways of accomplishing goals. Creativity is the name of the game. So that's what a mediator should be doing, is listening hard to what both of you would like and helping brainstorm ideas that you've never thought of before. And sometimes the mediator never thought of them and is just, thinking in present time. And then unrealistic expectations of the law. So I know it's really easy in a mediation to say, you know what, if we don't settle here, we're just going to have to go to court. That is such a familiar chant. Well, and I understand that because that's the release. That's the way you are going to get something done if you go to court, but never use it as a threat. And always understand that you never know how a judge is going to decide. You really don't. And don't have unrealistic expectations of how the law is going to support you, because the law comes out of a human being's head and mouth, and you never know what kind of a day that judge has just had, if he or she had a fight before they left the house, if he or she had a horrible divorce, and that's the backdrop through which they make decisions, even though they may be making decisions that are within the range of where they have to work. It's still, you just don't know. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot going to court. It's there if you need it. Have almost no expectations of the law. I think that's a lot better. And know that in a mediation, if you both are invested in finding a compromise and a solution, you will. With a good mediator, you will. Number 6, bad communication. Communication is where it's at in life. If we communicate properly, if we are sensitive to one another, if we're not condescending, things will go well for us. But in a divorce mediation, when our emotions are raw, where we are scared, our future is uncertain, our heart is racing every time we have to talk about divorce-related things, our communication may fail us. So practice not blaming each other. Even if you still blame, this is where it's at. If you can stop blaming each other, your communication will start to change. But it's hard to get out of your voice is that snarky, judgmental attitude. We think we're changing our communication by saying something like, okay, well, then I'll just go ahead and I'll take charge of changing the bank accounts because you knew I always did it anyway. That's snarky. That's not necessary. Stopping at, I will offer to go to the bank and start changing the names on the bank accounts. You can just leave it at that. You don't have to add the personal endorsement of, I've always done it, inferring you've never done it. or never did anything like this, and so therefore I'll just continue to do what I've always been doing. I don't think that wins friends and influences people outside of divorce. It certainly doesn't win your spouse over to you. Get the judgmentalness out of your voice. Stop blaming the other person. They're just a human being, just like you. We all make mistakes. We all exhibit behavior that we wish we could change. And even if you've been a true victim in your marriage, and sometimes that is the situation. One person has just been a victim. Maybe there's been domestic violence. Maybe one party had to suffocate or stifle their feelings and not speak during the marriage. Well, mediation is your time to speak. But maybe a therapist and getting out all the would be helpful, and getting out all the anger and the blame, and moving towards looking at divorce as a new beginning. Here I am bringing back my old phrase, divorce is a new beginning, and I philosophically believe that everything happens to us to teach us a lesson, and the lessons will make us stronger and wiser and help us evolve as people. I mean, this is challenging for me when I'm in a dispute with people, and yes, mediators also get into disputes, but I have to hold myself to a higher standard. And when I have a client who maybe starts blaming me for something, possibly they didn't understand, their expectations were incorrect, they read me wrong, maybe I could have phrased something better, so I have to look within myself to see what I could have done differently and better to affect a more positive relationship or more positive conversation with the client. I have to hold myself to the same standard. And when I'm in a dispute, I can't blame either. I have to look at, okay, let me see what I've done that contributed to this situation. And when I can start owning my responsibility, my voice changes, my thinking changes. So communication is so important that I say practice communication. Never talk about taking the high road. That road does not exist. It has been washed out in the divorce. All you can do is be kind and non-judgmental. You can be serious, you can be focused, you can have your bottom line that you don't want to go over, but you don't have to communicate in an unkind, harsh, judgmental way. When communication changes and people are without judgment and without mean-spiritedness, and they're just open about negotiating the settlement, everything changes in the room and we get a lot of work done. It really is your key secret to a good mediation, good communication. Number 7, I would like to address women, because women more than men, although some men do, but women more than men mediate against their own best interests by speaking unkindly and in a condescending manner, especially if the marriage is dissolving because their spouse has another relationship. Okay, that's about the hardest thing to deal with. It really is. Well, other than your spouse maybe becoming transgender or gay, we could talk to Kris Kardashian about that and how she's handling it. I know other couples that stayed together. I helped somebody write a book. My husband's a woman now. They're still together. But it's generally because the spouse has another relationship, or the spouse has exhibited financial malfeasance that has now destroyed the family for whatever reason. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, whatever the case. Depression. A latent personality disorder may have taken over. I mean, that is so many of the reasons why people are getting divorced, because personality disorders surface and they may not have surfaced in the past, or personality disorders are not have always been there, but are now untenable. So here's what women do. And let me just tell you a story about a mediation that I presided over. It wasn't unique, but it's the one that I think about. Couple is getting divorced, and yes, the husband does have another relationship, buying a house together, moving forward, even living somewhere else in the United States. He always worked. He always provided for the family. She came from money, though. So she came with inheritances and nest eggs. She did work as well. And she may have made more than him a couple times, less than him also, because her business was a pure commission basis, on a pure commission basis. But she was so upset that he had another relationship, that here's how the mediation started. He could have asked for spousal support because she actually had more money than him, and he didn't. And he didn't want to divide any of her assets that were larger than his assets. He was willing to walk away with no spousal support and no division of assets, which meant she kept everything and didn't have to pay spousal support. And that's how he started the mediation. But she was still so angry about the affair and the other resulting in a relationship that she kept hammering at him at how he never made the money he could have. She always had more money than him. She wanted him to pay her back for using inheritance money on kids' private school, which he didn't want to use inheritance money. They could go to a good public school or a different school that maybe he could have paid part of, but she spent inheritance money on school and now wanted to be paid back. Definitely you run to the lawyers to get clarity on law for that. And finally, he started asking for spousal support and then said, okay, well then let's just divide all of our assets. So it went from she could have everything, which is far more than he was going to walk away with, to let's divide everything, and she was going to have less. And she was actually agreeing to this. So I asked for the room to be just her and me. I asked him to leave the room for a minute, and I turned to her and I said, do you understand what just happened? And she really didn't. She said, no, we're just negotiating. And I said, right, you've now negotiated to lose more money. You've just negotiated part of your money away when you didn't have to, because you haven't resolved and forgiven that he's in love with somebody else. And that has to be one of the hardest things in the world to deal with, depending on depending on any issues you bring into the marriage. Maybe you came from a divorced family. Maybe you watched your father have other relationships. You don't know where people come from, and I'm not a therapist, so I can't really ask. But she didn't even realize that she was ending up with less money because all she could do was talk about the affair and try and diminish him, that he didn't have as much money as her, even though he had money. Nothing to sneeze at. And so she said to me, what should I do when he comes back in? And I said, apologize and change your communication. Apologize and watch things change. So he came back in and she did her best at apologizing. And then unfortunately went right back. So it takes a little bit of time, but I'm telling you, the look on his face softened, and he was ready to revise until she went back to condescending. So women, please use the fact that your spouse has another relationship as a learning tool, and see what you can do to evolve to another place, and then have a different relationship based on lessons learned in this one, so that you can flourish and grow. And another thing for women, now this is kind of on a flip side. there are so many women that feel they didn't have, this is number 8. There are so many women who feel they didn't have a voice in the marriage. So many women who caved every time they wanted to say something or disagree, and it would be to keep the peace. Does that sound like you? So here's my message to women who are now in a divorce mediation, and it is your time to have a voice. And I say, compromise, don't cave, speak up, don't go silent, don't cave anymore. Use this as an opportunity to find your voice. And again, not in a condescending way, but this is time for you to look at what's good and right and healthy for you, so that you can finally feel strong. And if it takes several mediations, it takes several mediations. Take baby steps. Just find your voice on one topic. And then if you need to break away and just catch your breath, say it. Start expressing yourself from your heart and honestly. And what I try and do when people come in my office to mediate, I try and really start by asking, are you nervous? Because if you can have people acknowledge the feelings that they have, if I can get people to say, I am so nervous, do you know that actually releases tension? And then you can say, okay, and I get nervous. If I were in their shoes, I would be nervous too. As I said earlier, I've been in mediation. I was nervous, and I'm a mediator. But when it's you on the line, when it's your money, your assets, your debts, your children, your support that you're trying to negotiate, that's the hardest thing, is to try and negotiate for support, because all we know to say is, I just want what's fair, and what's fair to you is not fair to the other person. So we have the law, and then we have what works for both of you. But compromise, don't cave, but absolutely don't give up your voice, and don't be mean to compensate, because honestly, you always had a voice, you just chose not to use it. It's easy to say, well, what could I do? What would I have done? I just wanted to keep the peace. Well, you could have learned how to communicate differently, and maybe you would have ended up getting divorced earlier, but at least your life would have turned around, and you would have been more fulfilled because you could speak and express yourself. Number 9. So let me go over to the male side. So I spoke about women, 7 and 8. Now men are going to be 9 and 10. Men, hiding money in terms of what you make and hiding assets is never going to work. You are not going to get away with it unless you are that person that has offshore accounts, which not everybody has, that you would have to hire an asset researcher to find. You know, I'm talking about the regular person who has a salary, then has commission and bonuses. Police officers fall into this category, and they don't want to really say what they make. Or maybe you're in the entertainment industry and you work for motion picture, but you also do events on the side, and you just happen to forget to write that part on your financial disclosure form. It's never going to work. You're going to end up spending more money on attorneys to find your hidden assets and money, and you're going to look so bad in the end. It's simply not worth it. Please come forward honestly with what you have and what you make, and then negotiate. You know, there is a software program in California called the Dissomaster. Don't know if it's in other states, but there have got to be formulas and ways to approach spousal support and child support. This is what I'm talking about. This is what you make is dependent on, or child and spousal support are dependent on what you make. You may as well just deal with it. It's not going to go away. You're going to be found out, and you're going to look horrible, and you're going to look untrustworthy. And then when you really do want to make an honest compromise, you're not going to be believed and you may not be appreciated. So just nip it in the bud, come forward, be accurate, be honest, get it over with, and then mediate. And then say why that you would rather pay less. You're allowed to say that, but at least be honest and accurate. And then lastly, number 10 for men, do not try and force fast decisions. That's the other thing I see men wanting to do more than women. I don't know whether that's men's way of dealing with pain. Let's just get it over with, rip the Band-Aid off, deal with it, move on, maybe. I don't know whether some men think that by making fast decisions, and I don't think this. You know what I was going to say is, maybe some men think that making fast decisions will get them the decision they want. Well, yes, men offer things, and it looks like a good decision to them. I'll give you that. But it may not be to your spouse. You have to let your spouse think. You have to let it percolate, because if you force your spouse to make a quick decision, I guarantee it won't stick. Guarantee it won't stick. They'll say yes in the mediation, then they'll walk away from the mediation, they'll talk to somebody, maybe an attorney, maybe a friend, maybe a family member, and everybody will say, are you kidding? Are you crazy? Why did you agree to that? It's not going to stick. What's going to stick are well thought out decisions. That's what's going to stick, and nothing but that. And ask an attorney. Even if decisions are made and you want to get things over quickly and your spouse agrees, there is a shelf life after the divorce is final where you can question the decisions that you made and go back to court and ask for modifications. So talk to an attorney about that. Thinking that getting things signed on the dotted line is the end of it, it's not. It's really not. You don't want to go to court to modify an agreement after the divorce is final. You really want to be able to walk away from that divorce feeling good about yourself, both of you feeling good about yourselves, feeling that you respected each other, you tried to do the best for each other, and that will make you feel really good in a very tough situation. The only caveat to this is if you're married to somebody with a severe personality disorder, narcissism is at the top, a sociopath is at the top. Well, it's going to be very hard to make decisions with those people, and you might have to go to trial. You simply might have to have a judge intervene. Or you might have to seriously compromise just to get out of the relationship. It depends on your situation, your financial situation, and what your needs are and what your ability to provide your own income is. But I'm talking, so that's extra special. Everything has to be taken into consideration. But, for the normal divorce where we're just not liking each other and we want to move on, the 10 tips that I gave you for the mistakes you could make and how to remedy them, they will work and give you a really good mediation and a really good conclusion to the divorce. So that's it for today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is Judy Weigel, Constructive Uncoupling. You can reach me anytime through my email, judy@divorceresourceinc.com. Judy, Judy, @divorceresourceinc.com. I look forward to our next podcast.